My name is Watson, Dr. Watson. It was my privilege to share the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. On this particular morning, Holmes, who usually rose very late, was seated at the breakfast table. I stood upon the hearthrug and picked up the stick which our visitor had left behind the night before.
Well, Watson, what do you make of it?
How did you know what I was doing? Holmes, I believe you have eyes in the back of your head.
I have. Or at least I have a well-polished silver coffee pot in front of me. But what do you make of our visitor's stick? Since we were so unfortunate as to miss him and have no notion of his errand, this accidental souvenir becomes of importance. You know my methods, Watson. Apply them.
I think that Dr. James Mortimer, his name is engraved upon the stick, is a successful elderly medical man, well esteemed since those who know him gave him this stick in appreciation.
Good. Excellent.
He is probably a country practitioner, but does a great deal of his visiting on foot.
Why so?
The iron tip is worn down, so it is evident that he has done a great deal of walking.
Perfectly sound.
And then there's the inscription, Friends of the CCH. I should guess that to be the something Hunt, to whom he has given some surgical assistance.
Watson, you habitually underrate your own abilities. It may be that you are not yourself luminous, but you are a conductor of light. The man is certainly a country practitioner, and he does walk a good deal.
I trust that there is nothing of consequence I overlooked.
I am afraid, my dear Watson, that when I called you a conductor, I meant that in noting your erroneous conclusions, I was guided towards the truth. For example, a presentation to a doctor is more likely to come from a hospital than from a hunt, and thus the initials CC very naturally suggest Charing Cross. Now, on what occasion would such a presentation be made? Obviously, at the moment when Dr. Mortimer withdrew from the hospital in order to start his own practice. So, from your grave, middle-aged family practitioner emerges a young fellow, unambitious, absent-minded, and the possessor of a favourite dog.
Dog?
The marks of his teeth are plainly visible where he carries the stick for his master. The dog's jaw is too broad for a terrier. It may be... Yes, by Jove, a curly-haired spaniel.
My dear fellow, how can you possibly be so sure?
For the very simple reason that I see the dog himself on our doorstep. And there is the ring of its owner. Come in, Dr. Mortimer.
The appearance of our visitor was a surprise to me. Though young, as Holmes had deduced, his back was already bowed, and he walked with a forward thrust of his head. As he entered, his eyes fell upon the stick in Holmes' hand, and he cried out with joy.
Oh, I am so very glad. I would not lose that stick for the world.
A presentation, I see.
Yes, sir.
From Charing Cross Hospital?
On the occasion of my marriage.
Dear, dear, that's bad. You have disarranged our little deductions. Your marriage, you say?
Yes, I married and so left the hospital to make a home of my own.
Not so far wrong after all, eh, Watson? And now, Dr. Mortimer, if you would kindly tell us the nature of your problem?
I have in my pocket an ancient manuscript.
I observed it as you entered the room. Early 18th century, unless it is a forgery. Surely you wish to consult me on something more modern?
Most modern. But the manuscript is short and is intimately connected with the affair. Of the origin of the Hound of the Baskervilles. In the time of the Great Rebellion, Baskerville Manor was held by Hugo Baskerville, a most profane and godless man. Hugo came to love the daughter of a yeoman, but the young maiden feared his evil name. So it came to pass that one Michaelmas Eve, Hugo stole the maiden and carried her off to Baskerville Hall, where she was placed in an upper chamber. Fearing for her life, the poor lass climbed down from her prison by the aid of the ivy and set out homeward across the moor. Some little time later, Hugo found his cage empty and the bird escaped. He cried aloud that he would render his body and soul to the powers of evil if he might but overtake the wench. So saying, he ran from the house, saddled his mare, and set off full cry into the moonlight over the moor.
Holmes!
My apologies, Dr. Mortimer. Pray continue.
Some time later, revelers, 13 in number, took horse and started pursuit. The revelers rode close together, for a great fear was on them. Now their path opened into a broad clearing in which the moon shone bright. There in the center lay the unhappy maid, dead of fear and fatigue. Nearby was the body of Sir Hugo. Standing over his body there stood a foul thing, a great black hound, larger than any mortal eye has rested upon. Even as they looked, the thing tore the throat out of Hugo, and the revelers rode for dear life, screaming with fear across the moor. Such is the tale, my sons, of the hound which has plagued our family sorely ever since. Well, Mr. Holmes, do you not find it interesting?
To a collector of fairy tales.
Then, Mr. Holmes, we will give you something a little more recent. This is the Devon County Chronicle from May 14th of this year. It is a short account of the inquest into the death of Sir Charles Baskerville.
The mystery surrounding the sudden death of Sir Charles cannot be said to have been resolved by the inquest, but there is no reason to suspect foul play or anything but natural causes. Watson, if you please.
The facts of the case are simple. Sir Charles Baskerville was in the habit of walking every night down the famous yew alley of Baskerville Hall. At 12 o'clock on the 4th of May, Barrymore, the Baskerville butler and caretaker, found the hall door still open and went in search of his master, whereupon he discovered Sir Charles' body. No sign of violence were evident, even though the testimony of Dr. Mortimer pointed to an almost incredible facial distortion, so great that he at first refused to believe that it was indeed his friend who lay before him.
This article contains all the public facts?
It does.
Then let me have the private ones.
Mr. Holmes, a man of science shrinks from seeming to endorse a popular superstition. But one false statement was made at the inquest. Barrymore did not observe any traces upon the ground near the body, but I did. Some little distance off, but fresh and clear.
Footprints?
Footprints.
A man's or a woman's?
Mr. Holmes, they were the footprints of a gigantic hound.
You saw this?
As clearly as I see you.
The marks you saw were on the path and not on the grass?
Yes, on the edge of the path, on the same side as the moor gate.
If I had only been there! That gravel page upon which I might have read has been long ere smudged by rain and defaced by the clogs of curious peasants. Oh, Dr. Mortimer, to think that you should have not called me in.
Mr. Holmes, there is a realm in which even the most acute and experienced of detectives is helpless.
You mean the supernatural?
Several people have seen a creature upon the moor which corresponds precisely with this Baskerville demon. They say it was a huge creature, luminous, ghastly, and spectral.
Dr. Mortimer, if you hold these views, why have you come to consult me at all?
The American heir, Sir Henry Baskerville, arrives at Waterloo Station in exactly 1 hour. What would you have me do with him?
I recommend, sir, that you first call off your spaniel, who is scratching at my front door, and then proceed to Waterloo. At 10 o'clock tomorrow, you will call upon me here and bring Sir Henry with you.